100%. Yeah, we do that quite frequently. We work with business brokers who are trying to validate businesses for sale, see if they're actually viable, and then we work with sellers directly as well. I mean, I think what it boils down to is most sellers know off the top of their head, like, hey, like this is right, this is like not truly okay, right, and it's kind of a gray area or completely wrong. They kind of know that earlier on, but they sometimes do get looped in, based on seeing market conditions or business brokers pushing them to sell at a time when maybe it's not really the best time to sell, and perhaps they should be strategizing for 2, 3 years down the road. But I actually do highly recommend that work with a business broker, SBA loan broker, or directly with an SBA lender to make sure that you're actually going to be able, a buyer is actually going to be able to finance the purchase of your company. Super important, and I highly recommend it.
Okay, and so maybe unpack for people who aren't familiar. You mentioned SBA loan broker. A lot of owners might think just go to their bank and talk to their Chase, or I know Wells Fargo does it, but they might talk to their local community bank, and that bank might have an SBA program, but that's probably not the best SBA bank to go for. So maybe unpack why that is and kind of how the SBA program really works.
Absolutely, absolutely. So SBA, just quickly in a nutshell, SBA 7A lending, it basically a loan from a regular bank, a regular lender, and they just have a guarantee from the SBA. You do have some non-bank SBA lenders. There's a handful of them in the country, but generally, like, just think of like your brick and mortar bank. You're walking in there. I want a loan for my company, or I'm trying to sell my company, right? And whoever the bank is that's making the loan will have a guarantee from the SBA. Generally, about 75% of the loan amount, subject to a $5 million cap under the 7A program. Now, there's something called the preferred lending program, which is basically lenders who make a certain amount of loans have this preferred status with the SBA, where if a lender does not have that preferred status with the SBA, every deal that lender puts forth actually has to get underwritten and approved by the SBA. So someone achieved the preferred lending status with the SBA, the lender can approve the loan in-house, and then just closer towards the end of the process, they have to go to the SBA, get a loan number, lock in their loan guarantee. But the point is, if you have that preferred lending status as a lender, you basically could approve the loan in-house, which is golden. Now, here's the thing. There's about 1,500 active lenders in the SBA space, okay? Now, the 7A program is a very versatile program. It's not just for business acquisitions. It could be used for owner-occupied real estate acquisitions, where the business is going to occupy the majority or all of the property that it's going to be buying. It could be used for working capital financing, inventory financing, debt refinancing, equipment, and things like that, right? So you have over 1,500 active lenders in the program, right? Now, it doesn't make sense to just, for a seller to go to their bank to have them evaluate the company, or have a buyer go to the bank that the seller is banking with because maybe they're familiar with the business. I mean, conceptually, you would think that would make sense, right? Like, logically, yeah, right. Of course, they're familiar with the business. They're more inclined to lend to the business, for the business. But in reality, it doesn't play out that way. And the short answer is because, first of all, of the 1,500, approximate 1,500 SBA 7A lenders out there that are active in the market, very few of them are actually like really aggressively lending under the program. Like, you're talking about 5% of the 1,500 that are aggressively lending under the program. Okay, now within that 5%, we're talking about different credit boxes, different appetites for different kinds of deals. So, for example, like a very common thing for from a buyer's perspective when they're looking for an SBA loan is they'll say, hey, let's go look at the rankings, right? Who's like a top SBA lender? And it, again, logically, it makes sense. Say, hey, well, ABC Bank is a top 5 SBA lender, so let me go take my acquisition deal to them, right? But in reality, within those top SBA lenders, again, there's the credit box, there's the types of deals they're lending for. The majority of them are lending for working capital, for example, or inventory. Additionally, that you have to factor in, like, well, what's the average loan amount that this bank is lending under the 7A program? Like, if I'm trying to buy a business and I need a $3 or $4 or $5 million 7A loan, but the bank's average loan amount is $100,000, like, does it make sense to go to them just because they're in the rankings? And then you also have the fact that, okay, well, some banks love transportation and logistics, for example, but I'm trying to buy a manufacturing company. So again, you could go to a lender that is super active in the space, but you're kind of just spinning your wheels. So that's just like a couple of reasons why you need to make sure that you're properly selecting the right lender, not just basing it off of rankings, and not working just with the seller's bank as well, because again, that doesn't necessarily lead to like a closed deal.
Yeah, you hit on something really important there. I think I've spoken to people before, and I'm like, they're like, well, I wasn't approved. I'm like, well, were you not SBA approved, or was the bank not approving you? That's a different question, right? Now, there's certain types of businesses that the SBA won't work with in general, but that doesn't mean just because the SBA will, the bank will, right? And so understanding that, and so if you go to your local bank or a random bank you find on the internet, you go, "Oh, well, I need a loan for, or I want to start a business." It doesn't mean that bank likes to lend for the size or for the industry, as you mentioned. And that seems to be a big component in this process, is that understanding that there are multiple banks that will do this, but they might not love your industry or your size. And so how often do you think that kind of gets overlooked when people are going through this process?
I really think it gets overlooked all the time, there's even like a bigger point there where you have the SOP, the SASOP, which is over 400 pages long, right? And generally, the SB sets like the minimum needed to get a deal approved, right? But just remember that on top of the SBA rulebook, every lender has their own credit box too. So just because it's allowed under the SBA rules, and you found a participating PLP lender, it doesn't mean you're getting the deal through. And really, like, the unfortunate nature is, and this is just so common, and it kind of eats me up alive. You have a lot of deals die because they kind of take the approach of, let's go to the bank that the seller is with. Let's go to maybe my bank that I bank with, because they're very nice to me and when I come into the branch to make deposits. Or let's go to someone who just, well, they're a top 10 lender, right? The reality is that a big part of the process is working with the right people, not just the right lender, who you're working with at the lender. The unfortunate nature is that most of the time, lenders that end up denying deals after a multi-week or sometimes a multi-month process, they could have told you off the bat just by having a 1 hour conversation with you that it's probably not a good fit for their bank. What happens is people are just going to lenders, they're working with the wrong people just pulling files in, they're doing intake, and then they're just being dragged through the mud for a good couple of months, a few weeks, a few months. And then the seller is getting frustrated, the deal dies, the seller wants to retrade. So it's just a big trap I find that a lot of buyers fall into, and then they're trying to really figure something out when the deal is kind of hanging off a cliff, which is just incredibly frustrating. When you have a good deal and it's being approached in the wrong way, it's just really sad when I see that happen.